Hey guys, so this unit is called, I call it the Interwar Years, but it's really the rise of dictators. There's a bunch of different dictators we're going to look at this period of time. There's 3 different YouTube videos, kind of like a little mini series that I'm putting up for you to watch. It doesn't matter what order you watch them in. I am just doing Adolf Hitler in Germany first because I'm assuming that that is probably the one you clicked on first because most people want to learn more about Adolf Hitler. You can watch them in any order, really doesn't matter. This PowerPoint is available for you on Google Classroom, so you have access to it. There's a couple YouTube links embedded in it. The easiest way to watch that is from present mode, that's why I put it down here. You probably already know that. Okay, let's just start. So, Weimar Republic is what we call Germany post World War One. So we're post 1918. They form a new democratic government. The problem, and if you remember from the Treaty of Versailles, Germany took the war guilt clause, meaning that all of World War One they said was their fault, and because it was their fault, they have to pay back the cost of World War One, which is an astronomical number. Now, if you see those pictures to the left, that's money. That's called hyperinflation. When Germany didn't really know what to do, so they just started printing more money. Now, we've talked about supply and demand enough. You guys probably understand. Go back to your Yeezy sneaker or all that Supreme stuff that used to be popular. If the supply is high and the demand is low, the price goes down. If the supply is low and then demand is high, price goes up. Kind of the same. Everyone needs money. The government needs money, except the demand is really high for it. So Germany's solution was to print more money. What that does is drive up the price of everything. So one of the cool things that historians have done over the years is compare the cost of bread, just because that's a pretty standard cost that we can look at, and bread isn't like astronomically expensive to begin with. So people like high schoolers can understand how much it changed. So in 1918, when the Treaty of Versailles was signed, Germany wasn't in the euro at that time. They weren't part of the EU. Obviously, it didn't exist. So they had their own money, and it was called the mark. In 1918, one loaf of bread cost 1 mark. In 1922, one loaf of bread cost 160 marks. 1 year later, that same exact loaf of bread now costs 200 billion marks. That's for one loaf of bread. Imagine if you had to buy a house. You you just couldn't. That number, you would have to bring a dump truck load of money. And that's because there was so much money in the economy now. So Germany has a lot of problems, and they part of it's their economy, but part of it's just the people. They're very like drugged down. They're very sorry about war. They don't want to go back. They promised that they'd never go to war with France again, and they joined the League of Nations. Now, remember, the League of Nations kind of is irrelevant after a period of time because the United States doesn't join, but Germany still makes that first effort of, hey, we're never going to do this again. We're going to join the League of Nations. I'm not going to read this to you because you all know how to read. I want you to read it though. This is a primary source about someone in Germany who talks about how quickly the price of any sort of good or commodity was changing at the time. It's short. I think it's pretty insightful and kind of explains to an outsider how quickly things were changing in the economy. This is pretty cool. This is a mark, obviously a picture of a mark. It is that's a $100 million bill. That's how much money they're printing. When you have to print $1 million bills, $1 billion bills, you know that a single dollar bill is basically worth nothing. So, the rise of Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler was a soldier in World War One. So don't think that he just arose from the ashes that were Germany and became something. He actually was a soldier. He was Austrian, which is a country in Europe. He's Austrian by nationality, but he really sides with this whole Germany side of his family. If you get really bored, which some of you might be, look at the background and the upbringing of Adolf Hitler. It's pretty interesting. So after World War I is over, Adolf Hitler joins a group of radicals who thought the Treaty of Versailles wasn't fair to Germany. He slowly works his way in, and this party ends up calling themselves the National Social German Workers' Party, which ends up taking the term Nazi for short. Hitler wasn't famous to begin with, and he slowly started to rise through the rankings, and it becomes very apparent that he is a very good orator. When I say orator, I mean he's very good at public speaking, and that helps him rise through the rankings so quickly. Um, he becomes the leader, or the Führer, that's what they call it in Germany, of the Nazi Party. And one of the things he tries to do initially is he tries to overthrow the government in Munich. And that's his first kind of political activism as a person, is overthrowing the government. Now, the Nazi Party wasn't huge at the time. The Nazi Party would be, if I had to relate it today, would you probably wouldn't even hear about them. But let's call them like the Green Party, which you might not have heard of. Very small, not many people knew it. So when Hitler and the Nazi Party tried to do this, Hitler went to jail for a year. And that's what you're looking at on the right. That's actually Hitler's jail cell. Very different than today. When he was in prison, he wrote his book called Mein Kampf, and Mein Kampf is German for My Struggle, and it's basically Hitler's manifesto. It's everything he believed. It's everything he believed should happen to Germany. Some of the things he says in Mein Kampf, where Aryans are the master race, so blonde hair, blue eyes, all of those people, they are supreme. Everyone else is not. Kind of ironic too, because blonde hair and blue eyes is not a native characteristic of German. That would be a like a Nordic, Sweden, Finland characteristic, not German. And he wasn't even technically Aryan. He didn't have blonde hair and he didn't have blue eyes. So there's that. He again. Mein Kampf, he talks about how the Treaty of Versailles is unfair, and one of the reasons that he thinks that we need to we definitely not we that he needs to expand Germany is because of this thing called Lebensraum. Now, Lebensraum is that there needs to be more space for all Aryans, and that all Aryans should live together. Because of Lebensraum, he believes that Germany needs to get bigger because all Germans should come and live in the same area. So that's kind of his rationale for we need to make a bigger Germany. Now, how do you gain more land? You obviously imperialize it and you take over other parts of it. You can kind of see the gears turning in Hitler's mind of what do we have to do to make this happen. Now, when Hitler is released from jail a year later, he lays low a little bit until he starts to run again. There is a really good TED Talk video I want you to watch. It does a really good job of explaining how Hitler becomes more powerful. It's like 7 minutes long, and just go ahead and watch that. It's a TEDx. It does a good job of how Hitler becomes from nothing to something. All right, but if I had to give you the rundown, it would look like this. So Hitler becomes chancellor. Hitler does start to become popular in society. He loses the election to President Hindenburg in 1933, but Hindenburg isn't not he isn't dumb. Okay, Hindenburg knows that Hitler has a lot of followers, and if Hindenburg brings Hitler on as his chancellor or vice president, that he'll probably get more votes. So that's exactly what he does. Hitler becomes the vice president. He doesn't have a lot of power, but there is a massive event that happens in Germany where Hitler finds the opportunity to gain more power for himself. He does that, but then Hindenburg dies of a stroke, meaning that Hitler is in power regardless. Hitler has this group of police force called the SS, another really cool research topic. Think about these things if you have to write a paper later. Okay, the SS would be Hitler's secret police force. Pretty cool. You actually had to be a certain height. You had to meet certain characteristics, like physically, your hair color. Obviously, you had to be Aryan. You had to be come from an only German family. You had to be pure German blood. That's Hitler's personal army. So the SS once Hitler becomes president, starts to arrest all of Hitler's enemies. They're getting rid of anyone who would ever challenge Hitler. And they force all the Germans to follow what Hitler's saying. And if you don't follow, then you disappear. Then Hitler starts Lebensraum, and he takes this area called the Rhineland and Sudetenland. And we're going to talk about those two areas specifically when we talk about World War II. But those are the first two areas that Hitler takes. Okay, here's the YouTube video I want you guys to watch. It's not that long, and it does a pretty good job. Okay, so when Hitler takes control, Germany's still in a great place. He starts to blame everything about World War I and the results of the economy on the Jewish people. He does this because, frankly, they just need a scapegoat. They need someone to blame all of these problems on, and no one's going to blame themselves. They don't want to make themselves look bad, so who do they pick? The Jews. Jews make up a very, very small portion of the German population, so they can't really represent themselves. When Hitler takes control, he builds a lot of factories. Now, that seems pretty small and meaningless, but it actually is huge, because when you build a factory, you create jobs. When people have jobs, they make money. And if they weren't making any money before and now they're making money, people are happy. If you give people money, they're happy. Take a look at what's going on right now ask your parents about the COVID-19 stimulus check. The idea behind that is to try and stimulate the economy. Some people haven't gotten a paycheck in a long time. They need that stimulus money. That's the government coming in. Definitely not the same idea, but when people have money, they're happy. Okay, some things that start to happen in Germany outside of that, propaganda. To the right, you can see those. To the right, that's definitely to the left. To the left, you can definitely see those two kids. They are super happy. They're looking like just genuine kids, but look at that flag behind them. They're happy under the Nazi flag. Other things that are happening in German society, religion couldn't criticize the Nazi Party, and schools, everything they taught in Germany in schools was what Hitler wanted to be taught. Just some other thing I just thought about factories. Some of the things that are happening in factories are a future move to help with World War II. If you're building up your industry, if you're building up your road system, which Hitler was also doing, maybe you guys have heard of the Autobahn. That road in Germany, you can travel as fast as you want on it, and it moves from one side of Germany all the way to the other. The Autobahn was started by Hitler so he could move tanks as quickly as possible across Germany. Those factories, remember we talked about total war in World War I when a factory is converted from one thing to another? That's what Hitler's doing right now. He's preparing. If the factory's there, you can convert it easily. If the factory's not there, you have to build it from scratch. So he is building factories just in case he needs them for total war later on. All right, one of the last things Hitler does, technically before World War II starts, is he signs a non-aggression pact with Poland. Just hold on to this. It's going to be important later. All right, talked about a little bit already. Jews make up 1% of the population. In Germany, they get blamed for everything that's happened in World War I. They just need a scapegoat. Hitler passed laws taking their rights away, and this is probably where you pick up on your knowledge of World War II a little bit. Jews, remember, were forced to wear the Star of David. If there was a business owned by Jews, they had to put the Star of David out front. They had to identify themselves. Just a series of things that were pretty horrible that Hitler forced the Jews to do. Now, on November 9th, 1938, this is kind of a huge turning point in the life of Jewish people in Germany. It's called Kristallnacht, which is German for Night of Broken Glass. This was part of Hitler's final solution to basically rid Germany of anyone who was Jewish. Now remember, as part of Lebensraum, he wanted everyone who was Aryan to live in Germany. So for that to happen, he needed to get rid of all the Jews in his area, and the easiest way that he thought that he could get that done is literally to kill them all. We know that as the Holocaust, but there was many hundreds of thousands of deaths or disappearances that occurred before that against the Jewish people.